In order to cure Benjamin's illness, I lost an eye. When he finally regained his sight, I learned that he was going to be engaged to the Johnson girl. I rushed to the hospital to ask him face to face, but I accidentally overheard him talking to a friend. "You're getting married. What about your ex-girlfriend? She was willing to donate her own eye to you in order to cure your illness." Benjamin laughed softly. His tone became cold. At that time, I was blind. In order to prevent Emily from being dragged down with me, I had to pretend that I couldn't live without her. I never thought she would actually believe it. Since she loves me so much, there must be something she can do to help me. After a while, you get tired of looking at someone's appearance. It seems interesting to occasionally experience something different. My hand rested on the doorknob. Tears silently flowed down my face. At this moment, I finally understood. The person I treated with all my heart wasn't worth it at all. The world is full of surprises and ironies. He had wronged me, but I never thought that one day he would have to call me Mom. That day, I ran out of the karaoke bar. My clothes were soaked from the wine thrown by the customers. They stuck to my body. I felt very uncomfortable. Outside the door, there was someone standing with his back to the door. I knew who it was as soon as I saw him. I said, "Sir, thank you very much just now." He turned his head. The well-maintained face looked to be about 40 years old. The eyebrows were long. The eyes were bright. The eyes were deep. Before in the KTV. If it weren't for him helping me get rid of those drunk people, I might still have been hassled by them for a while. The man across from me stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. He smiled and waved. "If you get into trouble in the future, feel free to come to me, Sophia." I forced a smile. I simply thanked him. Then I hailed a cab and left. Although I was also curious about how he knew my name, but I no longer had time to ask. I was in a hurry to get somewhere. I had to find Benjamin. I had to ask him face to face why he was engaged to another woman. I ran to the hospital. I wanted to ask him face to face, but I overheard his conversation with a friend. "You're getting married. What about your kind ex-girlfriend? In the beginning, in order to cure you, she was even willing to give you her eyes." Benjamin chuckled softly. There was a hint of coldness in his voice. "When I went blind, in order not to burden Emily, I had to pretend that I couldn't live without her. I never thought she would be so naive. Since she likes me so much, she will definitely come in handy in the future." Everyone gets tired of the same old thing. It's nice to try something different once in a while. Tears kept running down my face. I closed my eyes tightly. 15 years ago, Benjamin moved in as my neighbor. He had no mother since childhood. There was only a father who was always drunk and beat him. He was the same age as me, but he was almost half a head shorter than me. That day, I saw his father holding a bottle of wine on the street. It looked like he was going to hit his little head. I rushed up and pushed his father to the ground with all my strength. I don't know where I got the courage, and pulled him behind me. I shouted, "If you hit him again, I'll call the police. I'll report you for bullying a child." From then on, I held Benjamin's cold little hand. I walked through primary school with him. No one ever dared bully him again. "Sophia, you'll always be my hero. When I grow up, I'll marry you. Is that okay?" He used to ask me that a lot. In junior high school, he was particularly bad at English. He often came to my house to do his homework. The light was on late into the night. I helped him practice his oral English over and over again. "Sophia, you're so pretty. When you grow up, you can't marry anyone else." When he went to high school, the once short and dark Benjamin had grown into a big boy of 180 cm. He was handsome and sunny. He often received love letters from girls, but he always kept me by his side. "I have a girlfriend. Stay out of it." Later, he went to university. His family could no longer afford his tuition. I didn't do well in the college entrance exam. I didn't even reach the minimum score for an ordinary undergraduate program. He looked so lost. He looked like a helpless child. I was lucky to find a job with a decent income. Without hesitation, I took on his tuition and living expenses. "You have to study hard. find a job after graduation. Don't forget to pay me back, I said with a smile. He scratched his head a little embarrassed, but still with a bit of stubbornness. No, after I graduate, I will marry you. The money I earn, I will give it all to you. I had to work 3 jobs a day just to pay for his schooling. Unexpectedly, during his first semester, a tumor grew in his right eye. In order to cure him, I took him to more than 10 big cities. In order to raise the high medical expenses, I had to work as a singer in a karaoke bar. Benjamin had to have his eye removed because of the tumor pressing on it. He lost his sight in his right eye. I took him to the doctor every day and night. In order to let him see again, I didn't hesitate to donate my right eye. He said to me with emotion, "Wife, you are my savior. When I regain my sight, I will definitely marry you." The memory ends here for now. The voices in the ward continue. What would happen if she found out? She would never want to be caged like a canary. Opposite. Benjamin's voice pauses, but soon it comes again, with a little confidence and smugness in his tone. Even if she found out, it would be fine. After all these years, she loves me so much. She can't live without me. She is so simple. She has no secrets from me. Even if I asked for her heart, she would give it to me without hesitation. Anne, she only has one eye left now. Apart from me, who else would care about her? My body felt as if it had frozen. Tears flowed silently down my face. My body, which had just run up a sweat, was now soaked in the chipow. When the cool wind blew, I felt a piercing cold. My mind suddenly went blank. It felt as if someone had hit me with a stick. This feeling seemed to remind me that what I had done was indeed a bit silly. Right. I'll see Emily in a little while. Don't mention Sophia. The day God restored my sight, He brought Emily back to me, and He also brought me into a wealthy family. These are the greatest blessings I've received. I will never let anyone destroy this. The voice continued. I know. Don't worry, but you're really lucky. You actually made Emily, the Johnson family's eldest daughter, fall in love with you at first sight, Benjamin said with a proud face. Who could blame me for being so handsome? If I hadn't heard him say those words with my own ears, I wouldn't have believed it. I always thought that as long as I treated him like everything to me, he would treat me the same way. But I was still too naive. When I stumbled back into the karaoke bar, Manager Mike slapped me without saying a word. Do you want to quit? He asked. You left your customers and ran out during work. If you don't want to work here anymore, just say so. Give me back the $1 million. You can leave now. I borrowed the $1 million from the KTV to pay for Benjamin's operation. I've never been hit so hard before. My prosthetic eye on the right side almost fell out. I licked the blood in my mouth. Without saying a word, I just received an assignment. You need to go to Haishin Villa tomorrow night. Manager Mike wiped his hands. Then he threw over a note with the address. I looked at him and said, Manager Mike, I remember telling you, I'm only responsible for the on-site work. I don't participate in off-site activities. This is... Before I could finish, he waved his hand and slapped me again. Did I say I needed to discuss this with you? I'm giving you an order. Do you understand? Sophia, I've never revealed your secret because I feel sorry for your eyes. I've given you enough face. Don't push it. Why do you think the boss lent you $1 million? If you don't listen, not only will you fail on the business trip, you won't even be able to save your life. I sat down on the floor, feeling helpless. I picked up the address that had fallen to the ground and carefully put it in my pocket. Only then did Manager Mike turn around and leave in big strides. I put on light makeup, wearing a tracksuit, trying to look as plain as possible. It's just that I've seen so many unpleasant men. The invisible pressure still makes me feel breathless. Following the address, I quickly found Villa Haishin. This is such a grand villa. It's the first time I've seen one. The aunt who opened the door gave me a look. Her eyes were obviously much colder. She waved her hand. She told me directly that there was no junk for sale. At this time, a familiar voice came from inside the house. Let her in. Walking into the room, I discovered that it was Benjamin who had called me. Next to him stood 2 or 3 men I didn't know. What? We hadn't seen each other for just a few days. You don't remember me? Benjamin was holding a glass of red wine in his hand. He squinted at me. Seeing that I didn't react, he staggered over to me. He grabbed my arm. In no time, his face was almost touching mine. Geez, it looks pretty real. If you don't look closely, you can't tell it's fake. You are still as beautiful as ever. After he finished speaking, he stared at my right eye. His hand reached out unconsciously. I immediately shouted, "What are you doing? Benjamin, you have to let go of me." I suddenly felt uncomfortable. My stomach felt sick. Maybe my resistance aroused his competitive spirit. He suddenly pulled me into his arms. He lowered his head, his lips touched my earlobe, whispered softly, "Since you're here, don't pretend to be innocent. You're just a hostess. You've had a lot of men, haven't you? Come on, tell me, what do you want to do tonight? Am I alone, or are they together?" I was shocked. My body involuntarily curled up. "Benjamin, let go of me. I'm not that kind of person. I'm just a singer in a karaoke bar. I just sing. I don't sell my body." I finished speaking. They listened. It seemed like they found it quite interesting. They looked at me with strange expressions. "Sophia, they are all Johnson's business partners. You know that too. My position in the Johnson household needs to be secured. You are in charge of entertaining them tonight. I won't let you down." Benjamin finished speaking. He pushed me into the crowd. In an instant, several dirty hands reached out for me, like big snakes, wrapped themselves around me. "No, don't do this," I yelled frantically. I grabbed the bag on my body and swung it around like a weapon. Then, I fled in a panic. I ran all the way to the intersection outside the villa. I couldn't hold it in anymore, and started vomiting uncontrollably. He sneered, "Don't pretend. Don't you enjoy this feeling, Sophia? In the beginning, you hid from me and did that kind of thing. It's because you can't live without a man, isn't it? I've satisfied you tonight. Why did you leave again? How long are you going to pretend in front of me?" Behind me, Benjamin's voice came sharply. I took a deep breath. I turned around and slapped him hard. "Benjamin, you've gone too far." Benjamin looked a little dazed after being hit. He stared at me. His eyes were full of mixed emotions. I was a little confused. Suddenly, the sky flashed with lightning. A strong wind blew. I was wearing thin clothes. I shivered with cold. Benjamin paused. He took out $100 from his pocket. He threw it hard in my face. "This is the tip. You can go now." After he threw the money, he strode back to the villa. Raindrops fell intensively, very quickly. I was drenched. I couldn't control myself. I burst into tears. The sound of the rain mingled with the thunder. It was as if I was crying out all my grievances. But in the end, all my emotions were swallowed up by the heavy rain. I had run so fast that I hadn't even bothered to put on my shoes. I was barefoot. Like a lost soul, I walked along the road. The storm lashed my face, but it couldn't wash away the humiliation in my heart. I had a high fever. I slept for 2 whole days in a daze. My mother's phone calls came one after the other. She said that Grandma was dying. She urged me to hurry back to see her one last time. I quickly bought the nearest train ticket. I didn't even bring any luggage. I just rushed onto the train. When I arrived home, Grandma was lying in bed. She had already shrunk to a skeleton. She stretched out her bony hands. She held me tightly. She hadn't eaten in a long time. Grandma didn't even have the strength to speak. I couldn't stop crying. Since I was little, my grandmother had raised me. Whenever I was wronged, she was always the first to stand up for me. Now, she was old. She could no longer shield me from the wind and rain, but I didn't even know she was sick. I pounded my chest hard to make myself feel better. I said to my grandmother, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were so sick. If I had known you were sick, I would never have stayed away for so long." For 5 years, I've been unable to come home to help with Benjamin's schooling and medical expenses. In the end, I've lost the most important thing of all. Grandma suddenly grabbed my hand. Her mouth opened and closed. She seemed to want to say something. I was so anxious, but I had no idea what she meant. When my mother saw what was going on, she immediately leaned in. After a long while, she turned around and looked at me. "Your grandmother kept talking about lotuses. Lotus flowers." I suddenly understood. When I was little, I loved going to the river with my grandmother. Every time we went, she would pick a big lotus flower for me. My grandmother always said, I hope your life goes well. I ran out of the house like a possessed. I went straight to the river outside the village. Luckily, there were still lotuses in the river. I quickly picked two and hurried back. Just as I reached the door, I ran into Benjamin and Emily. They asked me, "Are you a stalker? You saw me coming back, so you snuck back here." Benjamin gave me a glance. His eyes were full of amusement. I ignored him. I was about to go in, but Emily stopped me. "I'm talking to you. Don't even think about running away," Emily said impatiently. "Get out of my way. I don't have time for this. My grandmother's situation is more important." She was about to leave. Emily suddenly sat on the ground and shouted, "Benjamin!" She pushed me. "It's ridiculous. This kind of old trick. I don't even want to watch. Right now. I just want to see my grandmother as soon as possible." Seeing the person I care about most sitting on the ground, Benjamin's anger in his eyes could no longer be controlled. He quickly rushed in front of me and snatched the lotus flower from my hands. He threw it hard to the ground and stamped on it hard. Seeing the lotus flower being trampled, I was furious. I rushed over and grabbed Benjamin by the neck. Just then, there was a sudden cry in the room. "Mom, Mom, what's wrong? Mom, wake up. Open your eyes." Holding a handful of broken lotus flowers with soil on them and walked over to Grandma's bed, but she had already closed her eyes forever. My heart felt empty. My whole body felt light and floating. It felt as if I had no one to lean on. "Benjamin, I swear, I will never let you off the hook." Grandma had passed away. Mom told me. Before she died, Grandma kept calling out my name. I sat quietly in front of Grandma's body, but I didn't shed a single tear. It turned out, when someone is extremely sad, one cannot cry. His mind kept flashing back to the moments he had spent with his grandmother. His grandmother's voice and smile seemed to be right in front of him. His body trembled uncontrollably. He did not want to wake up from these memories. His grandmother's funeral was taking place, but in the neighboring Benjamin's house, there was joy and celebration. Red lanterns hung in the doorway. He had invited almost the entire village to attend the engagement banquet for him and Emily. "So, what do you think? Grandma has passed away. You must be very sad. If you are, cry." Benjamin, dressed in a suit, slyly stares at my face. I don't say a word. I lower my head and silently burn the paper offerings. Emily stands nearby, her face full of disdain. Once again, she comes over to provoke me. Look at her. Not a tear. What's the point of pretending to be close? I can't believe she's not even sad. She's probably happy her grandmother is dead. I really can't stand it anymore. I'm so angry that I want to stop her from talking right away. I stand up abruptly, but Benjamin reaches out and stops me. "What are you doing, my woman? Who do you think you are?" He shakes my hand off. I almost lose my balance and fall. "We're mourning our grandmother. If you can't stand it, you can leave." I say each word with a firm tone of voice, warning them. Benjamin then pretends to respectfully burn incense for his grandmother. Emily stood to one side, wearing an ill-matched red dress, with a disdainful expression on her face. 15 years ago, Benjamin was skinny as a rake, and Grandma often made him sweet and sour pork. "Grandma, this dish is delicious. Can I eat it every day?" He took Grandma's hand and begged coquettishly. How could it be that in the blink of an eye, he had become so horrible? My mind was in a complete mess. Staring blankly at the man in front of me, I didn't come back to my senses until his figure disappeared. He owes me and Grandma. He has to pay. After I had skipped work for a week, when I returned to work, Manager Mike dragged me to the entrance of a KTV. He said, "Kneel here. Without my permission, don't get up." People were coming and going on the street. Many people were curious and came to take a look at me. A few sisters who used to work together with me when someone came by, they deliberately splashed water on me. Oops. I wondered who it was. It turned out to be our main performer, Sophia. Tut tut. I'm so sorry. I didn't notice. She pretended to be apologetic and casually wiped it off with a tissue, but a large part of my hair and clothes were already wet. I remained silent. At that moment, two drunkards came over. They stared at me with evil intent. "Hey, pretty girl, What are you doing on your knees? Come with me, he said loudly. I've rented the whole place tonight. Then he dragged me to his car without further ado. I shouted, but my voice was drowned out by the loud drumming. I could see that I was already being pushed into the car. At that moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from next to me. Stop. Don't touch her. I looked up sharply. I saw the familiar face in front of me, a handsome man, standing straight in front of me, with a serious expression. He spoke. Sophia, we meet again. My body suddenly sank. I fell into his arms. I looked up, just to meet his unfathomable eyes. Two drunkards were about to lose their temper. When they turned around and saw him, they immediately became too scared to make a sound. Their eyes widened, as if they suddenly came to their senses. Then, they bowed and scraped. They supported each other, and walked away in disgrace. Thank you, brother. If I remember correctly, you have already saved me many times. I quickly broke free from the man's embrace. My heart was pounding. It felt like a deer was jumping around inside me. I stick to my principles. I will not do anything against my will. But in order to express my gratitude, I can accept drinking and singing. I suddenly came to my senses. I said it. At least I could retain my last bit of self-respect. I believed it. There is always a reason for love and favors between adults. To express my gratitude, I said it straight out, because otherwise I didn't know how else to repay it. The man listened, and just smiled. Then he waved lightly in the distance. A black Mercedes slowly pulled up. It stopped in front of me. He opened the door. Polite, he invited me to get in. I glanced at him. My body moved of its own accord. I got into the car. The car drove off smoothly. It was quiet in the car, but I felt an indescribable sense of security. I looked at the man next to me. He exuded a sense of righteousness. He didn't seem like the kind of person who would be frivolous or unreliable. From the side, his appearance seemed a little familiar to me. After a while, the car pulled into the garage of a luxurious villa. I followed the man into the first floor of the villa. There was a room there. It looked like a private room in a karaoke bar. I was honored to be accompanied by Sophia. This is my home theater. Are we watching a movie or singing? The man politely introduced himself to me. Make yourself at home. Sophia, why don't you sing a song? I listened while drinking. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened the wine bottle and poured himself a glass. He slowly sipped it. On the surface, everything seemed calm, but there was always a hint of something deep in his eyes, as if there was something on his mind. I didn't think much of it. I just sang song after song, to express my gratitude. After all, singing is my job. After a while, I noticed that the older man next to me had become a little disoriented. Looking at the two empty bottles of red wine on the table, I guessed he might be drunk. Suddenly, he leaned on my shoulder all at once, mumbling Sophia, Sophia. I froze. It was actually not so bad that he had collapsed on top of me. After all, he had been drinking heavily. But why was he calling my name? Or was it? I didn't dare think about it. After I had put him down, I left the room. At the door, I met the chauffeur. After I had told him what had happened, he went in immediately. He carefully helped the man up. Boss, you've had too much to drink. It's time to go to bed. But the mention of Sophia in the man's words still left me with a nagging question. The driver noticed my confusion. He lowered his head and whispered an explanation. The Sophia the boss was talking about was the name of his late wife. He probably missed her so much. The man suddenly broke free and shouted, "Don't go." As soon as he turned around, he grabbed my hand and wouldn't let go. I had no choice. I had to follow him and take him back to the bedroom. After he lay down, he still wouldn't let go of my hand. The driver said he would wait downstairs. Then he left. I sat by the bed. His hand was in mine. I leaned over the edge of the bed and fell asleep. In the middle of the night, he woke up. We talked for a long time. He told me seriously, Benjamin is not a good partner. He is not worth all the effort I have put in. It turned out, he had known about me for a long time. Could it be? He has been paying attention to me for a long time. At this point, he didn't intend to explain anything to me. Instead, he kept nagging. He told me, when he was young, his wife was just like me with Benjamin. She gave him her all. She worked hard with him to build their business. When it started to take off, she passed away before she could enjoy the fruits of their labor. When he first saw me, he was so excited as if he had seen the rebirth of his wife. He secretly developed feelings for me, but felt inferior because of the age difference. I quietly watched him. I felt an inexplicable sense of closeness, just as I expected. He was just like me, also a pitiful person. I'm not sure if his feelings for me can be considered pure love, but that sincerity really touched me. After dawn, he asked his driver to take me home. Before leaving, he couldn't help but persuade me. Benjamin doesn't need your hard-earned money now. Why go to a place like a karaoke bar and let yourself be humiliated? Don't forget, you have to be good to yourself, he said. Then he handed me a check. He waved me away. I opened it. It clearly said 1 million. The number surprised and pleased me. A warm current surged through my heart. It slowly spread throughout my body. I had borrowed this 1 million. I borrowed it with great difficulty. Now he is treating me so well. Why do I deserve such love? Money is not the point. What matters is his sincerity. How can I let him down? I turned around. With a plop, I knelt down on one knee. Brother, I am Sophia. I want to propose to you. I have nothing to repay you with. I only hope to love you like your sister-in-law for the rest of my life. The man quickly helped me stand up. Tears also glistened in his eyes. Sophia, marriage is a serious matter. You must think carefully about it. I am sincere, but I still need your parents' approval. If you are willing, I will wait for your reply. I turned around and took the check. My heart was pounding as I left. I don't know if it was because I was free again or because I had met a good man. I asked the driver to take me directly back to the KTV. Maybe it was because I had the money. I became much more confident. Without hesitation, I kicked open the door to the boss's office. I threw the check for 1 million yuan on the table. I looked him straight in the eye and said, 1 million yuan. We're even. The rest of the money you can keep for yourself. The boss took the check. He immediately beamed with a servile smile. He nodded repeatedly and said, yes, yes, yes. You're a VIP because you have money. Miss, please wait a moment. I'll go find a receipt for you. After getting the receipt, I immediately tore it into pieces. I walked out of the club. I walked slowly home. Even the air was full of a sense of freedom. Thanks to my brother's help, I finally got out of trouble. Unexpectedly, fate is fickle. Just as I reached home, I ran into Benjamin. Seeing him again now, my heart was filled with mixed emotions. It was like a long-hidden scar suddenly being uncovered. This made me realize how stupid I was. How naive. But it's good. I might as well get all my worries out of the way today. He was still the same hypocritical person as before. He followed me in as soon as I entered the door. He couldn't wait to say, Sophia, I'm getting married tomorrow. We've been together since we were kids. Even if it wasn't love, at least there was family love, he suddenly said. I suddenly feel a little reluctant to let you go. I sneered. Looking at him, I said, Benjamin, your reluctance. I don't need it. I've got my own wedding to plan. I won't be able to attend your wedding. Sophia. He was clearly getting fed up. He interrupted me sternly. I'm serious. I know you love me. What I mean is, I'm about to marry into a wealthy family. We can't be husband and wife, but we can be lovers. I'll take responsibility for you, and you can forget about being a singer. I'll give you 5,000 yuan a month. Ha ha ha. This time I really couldn't hold back. I laughed even louder. You want a change of pace? Is that it? I turned around. I looked him straight in the eye. Leave here immediately. I feel uncomfortable just looking at you. Go, I said with a stern face. I yelled at him. Benjamin didn't expect me to react like this. A hint of disappointment shone in his eyes. He said, but, Sophia, you look like this, and you're also a blind person. If it weren't for me, who would want to take care of you? I paused. I took the kitchen knife and walked out of the kitchen. If you don't leave, I won't be polite. I couldn't hold back the anger in my heart anymore. Benjamin, in your eyes, am I just a broken toy? Benjamin froze for a moment. Then he pretended to reluctantly turn around and walk away. Before leaving, he specifically told me, Sophia, to stay at home tomorrow. Don't go to the wedding and cause trouble. Watching him act so confident and indifferent, I rubbed my eyes. I laughed to myself. Sophia, you really are both stupid and blind. You've been treating someone sincerely who is actually a complete jerk. That night, I ate to my heart's content, drank to my heart's content, and slept soundly. I felt more at ease than ever. But then I was woken up early the next morning. The sun was shining. I looked at the clock. It was only 9 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? I rubbed my eyes and went to open the door, but then two burly men barged in. As soon as they entered, they locked the door behind them. They ran their hands over their chins. Step by step, they forced me into the bedroom. Then they looked me up and down with leering eyes. Miss Sophia, Miss Johnson's daughter has asked us to keep you company. We heard that your beloved is getting married today. We were worried that you might be lonely, so we've sent the two of us to keep you company. Heh heh heh. After that, the two of them rushed up to me and roughly started to pull my clothes off. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together, and people are divided into groups. Benjamin is really infuriating. I never thought Emily would be so difficult to deal with. In desperation, I grabbed a fruit knife and held it to my neck. I knew I was no match for them. This was the only way I could threaten them. My desperate gesture surely stopped them in their tracks. They looked at me hesitantly, not knowing what to do. I was determined. I was ready. At worst, I would die. Just as we were at an impasse, there was a loud noise. It sounded like a door being forced open. We looked in the direction of the noise. Before long, a man walked in. He was wearing a black suit. His shiny leather shoes were polished. Unexpectedly, he was the same driver from yesterday. He frowned. He glanced at the two men. They immediately backed out in fear. I suddenly broke free from the two men. I felt much more relaxed. At that moment, I saw the familiar figure of the driver appear behind him. He was right behind him. I felt like I had seen a savior. Tears welled up in my eyes. I threw my arms around him. Sophia, it's okay. Don't be afraid. It's all right. I'm sorry I'm late. He looked at me with concern. He said softly. I couldn't help but burst into tears. It was as if I was letting out all my grievances. Why are you here? What's going on? Have you met before? I asked, full of doubts. You'll understand later. Let's go home first, he said, and picked me up, walking out. I suddenly remembered my decision. I said coquettishly, no, we have to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I want to get married today. His mouth curled up slightly. He couldn't help but kiss me on the forehead. This time, I wasn't impulsive, nor was I being stubborn. I was very sure I had met the right person. We took our documents and wedding candy and headed straight for the Civil Affairs Bureau. Today was Valentine's Day. There were a lot of couples there to get married. We took a number and waited in the lobby. I snatched his household registration book and said loudly, I'm going to marry you soon, and I don't even know your name yet. He laughed and gently nudged my nose. I was surprised to discover that the person standing in front of me also had the surname Johnson. Although I was thinking that there were so many people with the surname Johnson, it shouldn't be such a coincidence. But when I turned to the page of Emily, my fingers trembled involuntarily. Your daughter is Emily. Ah, you are family. I was so surprised that I could hardly keep my mouth shut. I quickly covered my mouth with my hand. He took my hand, hugged me tightly, and whispered, You guessed right. Good girl. It's okay. It doesn't affect how much I love you. Emily has been without a mother since she was young. I won't be able to teach the children. I'm so sorry. I made you laugh. In the future, I will still rely on you as my mother. Please give me some pointers. I quickly stood up. I wanted to say something back, but I couldn't find the right words. I looked at Michael. I realized that he had already become my solid backing without me realizing it. I was no longer afraid of anyone, and I decided to completely accept him for who he was. I smiled and leaned into his warm embrace again. Soon, we each held a small red notebook. Holding hands, we walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. When we looked at each other, he started acting up again. I could finally kiss my wife in public. That was great. I gave him a glare. We were both old enough to know better. It was so mushy. We sped along. We soon arrived at Benjamin's wedding. Yes, as elders, we should attend our children's weddings, to give them our blessings. The wedding hadn't started yet. The bride's parents had a sudden problem. The MC was informed of the situation. It was finally decided to call the bride and groom backstage. They quickly rehearsed. When Benjamin saw me, his eyes were full of mixed emotions. There was a hint of panic in them. He asked, "Why are you here? I warn you, if you dare to ruin this wedding, your parents will never be safe. I know where they live. If I send someone over, their safety will be." I sneered. I didn't expect him to be so self-centered at the last minute. He even threatened my parents' lives. I really despise people like him. He took me by the arm and started to walk me out. But as soon as he saw Michael, he let go of my arm immediately. He immediately became respectful. His upright body bent halfway. Before he could explain, Michael spoke first. "She is my wife, Sophia." I took advantage of the situation and turned around next to him and walked over to Michael. Michael took my hand and introduced us all with a smile. Hearing this, Benjamin's face turned very ugly. He never expected that I would become Michael's wife. Emily, who was standing next to him, was even more furious and stomped her feet. "Dad, I don't oppose you getting remarried, but this woman is not suitable. She works as a singer in a KTV. You know the kind of place, the kind of environment. Who knows what she has been through, and the people she has come into contact with." Michael suddenly stood up and slapped Emily hard in the face. Emily was still reeling, but nothing could be changed. She could only cover her beaten face, with tears in her eyes, and stare at him angrily, to express her dissatisfaction. "Emily, this is the first time Dad has ever hit you, and hopefully the last. All along, I have respected your choices, never interfering, just giving you some advice. But now look at yourself. What have you become? I can judge people much better than you. Sophia is practically the reincarnation of your own mother. Get down on your knees and call her mother, or you can start your own business. Don't touch the Johnson family business." Seeing Michael, who is usually so gentle, suddenly lose his temper, I quickly grabbed his hand. I kept shaking my head. I persuaded him to calm down. He looked serious. He gave me a light pat on the shoulder, to indicate that I need not worry. Emily was staring at us. Her eyes were full of anger, but she stubbornly stood where she was, not moving. In a stalemate, Benjamin came back from his shock, finally accepting the reality before him. He first knelt down, then pulled Emily down with all his strength. "Dad, Mom." I stared at the man. A sense of satisfaction gradually welled up in my heart. "Benjamin, your judgment has finally come. My married life has been quite comfortable. Michael has given me the power to make decisions for Emily and the couple at the Johnson family estate. Even her monthly expenses are included. On the surface, I have not been too harsh on them because of the past. Instead, I have followed Michael's thinking. Respect everyone's choices. We can only guide. We cannot intervene forcibly. Michael always wanted to throw me a grand wedding, but I didn't care. I insisted on disagreeing. I think as long as there is love in your heart, form doesn't matter. One day I woke up. The sun was already high in the sky. I rubbed my sleepy eyes and climbed out of bed. I sat down at the table in a daze. "Old Michael, what is this you're holding? What is this share transfer?" Michael came out of the kitchen with a mysterious smile. "My aunt. This is half of the Johnson Group's shares. I'm going to transfer them to you." "Old Michael, I don't want it. I don't care." "No." I rejected him with disdain. I started to eat on my own, but he reached out and stopped me. "Oops. My goodness. You're eating without washing up? You deserve the shares. Trust me. It's a guarantee for you." I pouted. "It's your ex-wife who deserves it. She's done so much for you." Michael finished drying his hands and sat upright in front of me. His tone was serious. He began to teach me, there is a price to be paid for good and evil. Everything has its cycle. If you don't believe me, look up. God will not let anyone go unpunished. Just work hard and pay your dues. Sooner or later, you will be rewarded. It's just a matter of time. It's not in a previous life. It's in this life. A month passed. Benjamin lost his right eye in a car accident. Since he had already had an operation before, he was unable to receive an eye transplant. That was it. He became blind again. He was soon dismissed by Emily as useless. Emily was unfaithful outside. She eventually sent him back to his hometown with a divorce agreement. So, at the eastern end of his hometown, you can always see a one-eyed man staring into the distance in a daze. Michael took good care of me. With his help, I was able to receive an eye donation soon. My right eye regained its vision. Life became bright and beautiful. What belonged to me came back to me after all the twists and turns. What didn't belong to him he couldn't get no matter what he did.